So if grandma, first of all, let's not throw grandma under the bus. She probably always loves her child so much and just wants the best for them. So first of all, it's like, wow, grandma, so generous, that's awesome. You don't have to go ballistic on grandma, don't go crazy.
Well, thank you for joining us for this radiant family moment. On behalf of Pastor Todd and Kelly, we are so honored to be with you and partner with you as you grow passionate followers of Jesus that will impact your world. Been so honored to have some time with Arlene Pellicane, and it has been an amazing journey as we talk about screen time and our kids. And this is the last segment with her, and we are going to address some frequently asked questions that are pretty important and relevant to what we've been talking about.
I'm getting a little nervous.
Well, Arlene, one of the things that we addressed was anger, but could you take us into that a little bit more? Why did we talk about anger when it comes to screens? What is happening in our kids' minds?
Yeah, so a lot of parents are very concerned because their kids seem to be more angry as they're playing more violent video games. And so this is a real thing. Like, sometimes you watch what your kids are looking and you think, what in the world are you doing? What are you looking at? No wonder. Even in Facebook, they showed that what gets engagement, and they realized that anger gets engagement. So posts that make you mad make you respond more so than a post that makes you go, oh, cute kitten, like an anger, oh, I can't believe that. That makes you, so how interesting. They really want to boost things that boost anger because it increases engagement. And I think if you're finding that you had a child that was, kind of calm, and then you introduced a certain video game into usually his life, it could be her life, but boys and girls play different types of games typically. But for boys, a lot of times if they're playing a first-person shooter game and they're looking at that for hours on end, and you're seeing they're becoming more aggressive, then that is a connection. There is something there that you can say, you know what, I've noticed you've been very angry with the family, just more angry in general lately. And I think it has to do with that video game that you're playing. And so we're going to, have you play a different game. Now, again, more anger. So now you've just invited more anger. But we as a parent, we've got to be ready for that. We've got to be ready to handle that, because the alternative is, okay, we just let you keep playing this and you just keep getting more angry. And there are stories in the book of, like older brothers who kind of went through this video game phase, and video games weren't a big thing, and then they see their younger brothers on the game. And it's interesting when an older brother can say, my younger brother used to be a nice guy, but now he cusses at us. He's so angry all the time. And I think it's the people he hangs out with when he plays video games and how he is. So be aware of what's happening. And just because your child plays a violent video game, it doesn't mean they're going to become a violent person. But will they be more likely to catch, kind of catching a cold because you're around it? It's the same idea that, okay, if your child is spending hours a day in a violent, hostile situation, that's probably very likely going to spill over in their personality, in their perception of the world, in their perception of women, all those things. That does matter. And so it may be that if you see that video games are fueling your son's anger, making him more angry or irritable, then that's a warning sign to say we can and we have to make a change.
Okay, wow. So on to another question. I know we talked about this a little bit in previous times, but when is a child, how does a parent say, when is my child ready for a phone? And I mean, we could talk about age-wise and everything like that. And also, the flip side of it, what if parents have already given a phone? How do you deal with that if they realize, you know what, it was too early?
So think of it, you can give like a smartphone or a dumb phone. I know a lot of people use the GAB, G-A-B-B, wireless phone. So that has, different features of being able to take pictures and text, but it's not a smartphone. So don't feel like if your child's asking for a phone, you have to make it a smartphone. You do have that option. And if your child is like, I'm embarrassed, then you're just like, sorry. So you just have to kind of take that out of the equation. But it's not, think of it for all your kids. It doesn't have to be the same for every kid. So if one kid got it at 12, it doesn't mean that everybody now is going to get it at 12. And you can tell them that at the beginning to say, hey, we're all wired differently, and maybe the 12-year-old can handle having a smartphone, but maybe the 15-year-old can't. So it doesn't have to be an age thing. See how sucked in the child gets into video games, into social media, into watching YouTube videos. If you've got a kid who plays sports, who has a side job, who knits, who plays the piano, who plays the guitar, and like spends 10 minutes on doing stuff, then that person might be able to have a phone. Right. But if you've got a kid who has like nothing going on except school, and you give them a phone, they're going to be like, okay, we're going to do the phone for 7 hours a day now. Right. So you just think about your child, their commitments, what their time is like. That actually has something to do with it. Don't buy into the lie that your kid is going to be all messed up if they don't get it like everyone else, right? There was a Facebook executive said the last kid in the class to get a phone wins. And what they meant by that, right, is that they get to have a childhood. They get to have fun. They don't have to be driven by social pressure. They don't have to be manipulated. If you haven't seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, that, normally I wouldn't recommend something on Netflix, but it's a Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. It's eye-opening, and it just shows you the manipulative power of they're trying to just move our choices a certain way, very slightly. And so for kids, this is important. A lot of kids, they don't have any business for that. So I would say not for elementary school. Your 5th, 6th grader does not need a smartphone. If you need to communicate with them, maybe you're in a blended family and you have to figure out who's going to pick up who, you can do that dumb phone and just do the text. That's fine. Middle school, kind of hold off as much as you can, because middle school is when they're trying to figure out who am I. And when they're asking who am I, you'd like them to hear, I'm a child of God. I'm loved by my family. I have worth. I am competent. But you give them a phone in 7th and 8th grade, they'll hear, I am ugly, I am stupid, I have to act in a certain way to be popular, to get more followers, I may have to not act like my parents want me to act. So you're just throwing in this whole thing. So remember Bill Gates, he didn't have a phone, didn't give the kids a phone until they were 14. So hold off. My kids, if your kids are like, we're the only ones. You can say, oh, there's a crazy lady that Radiant Church interviewed. So my kids, junior in high school, junior in high school, freshman in high school, 6th grader, no phones, and they're making it. It's like, this is healthy. This is good. So we have found, I'm not saying you have to do that. You don't have to feel guilty if you don't choose that, but I'm saying you can choose it, and it's really quite lovely. And if your kids are not responsible in their regular chores, right, feeding the dog, doing their homework, don't expect that they're going to be responsible to say, I will do everything that your phone contract says. So you have to look at their track record. And if you've given a phone and you're like, oh my word, this is awful. Like I'm hearing this and I'm just like, what do I do? Think about the pain points. What are the troubles? Maybe it's that you need to take that phone out of the room overnight. Maybe it's okay if you're going to keep your phone, then it's got to be charged in mom and dad's room overnight and you can't have it until after breakfast. Okay, so maybe that's your step. Maybe it's, hey, and all of these things you can preface with an apology, and we've talked in depth about that. And then, or maybe it's, hey, we realize we gave this to you too soon. So we're sorry, and we're going to take it back, and we're just going to do an experiment. And we're going to do this for a month, and then we're going to talk about it and see what happens. A lot of kids will say, you're going to ruin my life if you take my phone away. Like, kiss my social life goodbye, kiss my community goodbye, how am I ever going to talk to anyone? And a lot of times, even though there's a lot of drama in that moment, that a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, a lot of times those kids come back and they say, you know what, Mom, Dad, thank you. Like a lot of pressure that I felt is gone now, and I feel so much better. So be willing to be the bad guy to do something good for your kid.
That's so good.
That's really good.
Okay, as a guy, I like playing games, and that leads to the next question.
You're not alone.
And that's why we want to ask the question, what if it's the parents, particularly the guys oftentimes, but it could be guy or girl, what if it's the parent that plays all weekend?
Yeah, and I will say, the statistics show us that 46% of gamers are women. Wow. So we are gaming more, but we game different. We game, like we play Candy Crush while we're waiting in line. Yeah. So we don't play for hours and hours and hours, and that's why you don't really talk about us. We just play in the little in-between time. So for women, that's a call to, hey, put your little card game away and instead like engage with your family during those times. Now for men, they might disappear for hours, right? And then that's when it's more noticeable, like, hey, where were you? Where are you? So if some people will say, well, my husband plays with my kids, what am I supposed to do about that? That's their time to bond. So again, I would ask those questions. Is it casual gaming, at-risk gaming, or addicted gaming? And by that, it means like, hey, they play for an hour on the weekends, they have a lot of fun, and then that's kind of it for the week. That's probably fine. At-risk is like, okay, they're kind of playing longer and longer during the weekend, and then during the week, we're starting to have a lot of problems of them asking to play the game, and they're supposed to be doing their homework, other things. So now we're kind of like, we're kind of at risk. And then obviously addicted is, okay, dad and boys, they're playing all weekend long, and then every spare second they can get during the week, okay? So just kind of know what stage you're at, and if you're just in that casual phase, then maybe that's an okay thing for your husband and the kids to play together. Now, if you see that, okay, that's a problem, most husbands are not going to respond well to a wife, and maybe you're sitting next to each other right now, and one of you is getting really hot, and one of you is like poking the other one. Most men are not going to respond well to a wife that's like, "Why do you play games all the time with little kids? Don't you know that's so destructive?" So instead, as Dr. Chapman suggests, hey, honey, I think it's great that you want to spend time with the kids. I think it's great that you guys want to hang out, and it makes sense to me that you play this video game because it's something you can do in common. And that's it. So now you're kind of like praising him and not criticizing him for wanting to spend time. Then the next interaction might be, hey, you know what? Maybe instead of playing video games this weekend, maybe you guys could like throw a Frisbee around, or like you could like teach him how to throw a football or something else, And then you could talk about how I think it'd be cool that if they think of a memory with my dad, they don't only think of video games, but maybe they think of like, going hiking or going fishing or playing sports. Like that'd be kind of cool. So instead of being really critical about it, find things that are praiseworthy about it and then try to redirect as much as possible. Because again, we know that family time, that weekend time, that's precious. And if it's a little bit is done gaming, okay. But if a lot is through gaming, we want other ways to be able to connect with our kids.
That's good.
So for a mom who's saying, well, what if my son feels like he's left out because all of his friends do that?
Totally.
And here we're trying to say, we want you to be with your friends, and this is maybe the one way. How do we deal with that?
Yes, so I think this is such a key question because you don't want your kid to be disadvantaged. You want your kid to be able to have things to talk about. And so this is kind of that short-term, long-term perspective. So in the short term, okay, your kid is really involved in a gaming community. Like I was on an airplane flying here to Radiant, and there were these two guys, complete strangers, probably 20 years old, but they game. And you could hear them, oh, dude, and they're talking about, and they were like, one was really cussing, but that's beside the point. But they're talking about the games, and they're really bonded over the game. And I saw that, like, okay, these guys bond, but they didn't talk about anything else. That's the only thing they had in common. It's the only thing they could talk about. And so for boys, right now, like that might be cool that they game together and they have that common language, common world. But as they game more, what does that mean? They're not with their family as much. They don't do chores. They're not really doing homework. They might not be involved in music. They might not be serving in a community. Like they only have one reference point, and that's games. Right. So they're always comfortable with gamers talking about gaming. But as they grow up and they go to college and they get a job and they meet a girl, if all they are comfortable with is gaming and talking to other gamers and they're like super socially awkward, because think of it, boys, as they grow from elementary school into middle school into high school, those are like really socially awkward years. Yeah. And if all their experience is, oh yeah, we feel really good when we're gaming and we're with gamers, but man, we do not know how to interact with like teacher, adult, coach, girl, peers in real life, that if it doesn't have to do with gaming, outside of gaming, we don't know how to talk about those things or to engage in those things. That's when you have to say, okay, my kid might be left out because they don't know the latest video game. You know, my son Ethan, he will get crushed. Any video game he plays, he will get beaten. He will just be in the ground. He'll be humiliated. It's true. But that's one area of his life that he's failed at.
Right.
Given.
Yeah.
But if you take my son who's done other skills instead of video gaming, he tutors kids. He's a piano teacher. He makes money on the side.
Wow.
He loves to run. He'll go out and run 4 miles and come back. You know, if you take those kinds of things, it's going to be easier for him to transition into life and adulthood with other skills other than gaming. So your son might feel left out now, but better that he's prepared for his life.
That's good.
Than to be a 25-year-old who's really great at games, who is living in your basement, who cannot get a job, who has zero motivation. Is that really the crowd you want him to feel comfortable in? So I know that's hard, but you got to take that long look and realize, okay, short-term pain, he's left out. But look, long-term, he's going to be so much better off if I limit this in his life.
Okay, so here's the question. What if the intrusion, you've guarded your home, what if the intrusion comes from the outside? What if it's a gift from grandma or a stranger?
Exactly.
Not a stranger, hopefully, but.
Right, exactly. Right, so you can control what happens inside of your home, but what if a gift is introduced and grandma, you know, and we do, you know, you have screen kids, but we also have a companion mini book called Grandparenting Screen Kids. So many grandparents are with their grandkids now. So if grandma, you know, first of all, let's not throw grandma under the bus. She probably always loves her child so much and just wants the best for them. So first of all, it's like, wow, grandma, so generous. That's awesome. You know, you don't have to go ballistic on grandma. Don't go crazy. That's fine. Oh, Mom, that's great. That's so kind. But then you have this conversation of, okay, to the grandparent alone, right? You say, oh, let me just tell you our perspective. Here's what we were thinking about the phone use. Here's the book Screen Kids and why you should be concerned about your grandchild never talking to you anymore and just texting people. You know, so you can have this kind of conversation with the giver. You know, have a honest, like, we so appreciate this. You are so generous. Like, that was amazing. And just for you to know, this is where we're at. These are our concerns. So maybe we will keep your gift and give it at a later date. And if they're offended by that, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just trying to do what's best for my child. And honestly, that's all you can do. And hopefully that giver will not be offended. If it's like, you know what, it's sooner than we thought, but grandma gave it, let's give it a try. So you might say, hey, we're gonna do a month with this phone and see how it goes. And you may use this phone to talk to grandma. You may use this phone to Skype grandma, FaceTime grandma. You may use this to text us and tell us where you're at. But that's kind of all, you know, for younger kids. And if that's going to be a bar too heavy, then at the month's end, we're going to go ahead and take it away. You know, and keep grandma and whoever the giver is in the loop about this. And most likely they'll see like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know that they're sleeping with it under their pillow and up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching videos. Oh, I didn't get that, you know. So be gracious, but don't let it push you further than you want it to be.
That's good.
Okay, here's another tough one. Single family homes.
Yes.
If mom and dad don't agree on screen times, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because so many people, the kids have whiplash because at one, you know, a lot of times one home will be like, oh, play, do whatever you want. And then the other home is very strict and has guidelines. And of course, the strict person is the mean parent. And the other parent is the fun parent. So there's tension about that. So that's very difficult. So for those two parents, whether it's a blended family or in a first marriage or, you know, in a marriage of husband and wife, they don't always agree. Maybe the husband, one thinks like, oh, give the phone. And then the other spouse is like, no way, don't give the phone. So just like anything in life, it's how do we come to compromise? It's either going to be like, you're going to come to my side. I'm going to come to your side. We're going to meet in the middle somewhere. Or we're just going to have a standoff, agree to disagree, and then hopefully come back and get to something. So maybe it's we're going to meet in the middle. You think she should have a phone now. I think she should have one in 4 years. Let's have this discussion in 2. You know, you think 5 hours of video games is fine on the weekends. I think 1 hour is fine. Let's go 2.5. And the idea is, you know, let's try to be as similar as possible for the sake of our child. So let's try to put our grievances aside and be as similar as possible so that our child isn't like whiplash, like this is so different. And it's hard. It is hard. And in fact, I've talked to Laura Petherbridge. She's the author of The Smart Stepmom. And she'll say this is the issue for step families is technology, because one family wants it one way, the other family wants it another way. The stepsister has one, but I don't have one. This brother's allowed to play this game. Why am I not allowed to play this game? And there's so much uncertainty. And so as much as you can as parents to work with your biological children and to get on as similar of a page as you can between the families, that's going to help your children.
Speaking of so much, there has been so much that we've been able to dive into. There's so much you shared in our weekend service, but there's still so much more that we weren't able to talk about. And I hope this has been a help and a resource to you. Arlene, we are so grateful and thankful to you for providing something that strengthens us as families.
And I'm so grateful for your interest, right? For Radiant, for you all out there, that this is so good, that you've been watching and you want to learn and you want to grow and you want that rich family life and that media poor life. You just want this to get better. So I just applaud all of you for being together for this time.
Thank you so much. And again, there are resources available to you, but if anything, get the book, Screen Time. Let's start there. Let's make our families stronger. Again, thank you for joining us for this Radiant Family Moment. We're so honored to partner with you. And we're not done. God has done great things in us and through us as parents and families, but He's got so much more.